I'm Lynda, 68 years old, and nothing has ever broken my heart more than the day my son Thomas called to tell me I wasn't welcome at my own grandson's wedding. Jackson had been my world since the day he was born. Despite everything we'd been through as a family, I never imagined being excluded from one of the most important days of his life. The words still echo in my mind. We all agreed, don't come to the wedding. Before I tell you what happened when I walked into that wedding venue anyway, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to fight for your place in your family. Raising Thomas alone wasn't easy, but we managed. I worked 2 jobs to make sure he never felt the absence of his father, who left when I was still pregnant. I sacrificed everything to give my son a good life, and when he met Amanda in college, I was thrilled. She came from money, old money, but I tried not to let that intimidate me. I welcomed her into our modest home with open arms, cooking her favorite meals and trying to make her feel like part of our small family. When Amanda got pregnant with Jackson just a year after their wedding, I was overjoyed. Finally, a grandchild, Thomas and Amanda, were struggling financially since they were both still finishing school, so I offered them my spare bedroom. Those early years with Jackson were precious. While his parents attended classes and worked part-time jobs, I became his primary caregiver. I rocked him to sleep, changed his diapers, and witnessed his first smile, first word, first steps. The bond between us was instant and unbreakable, or so I thought. As Jackson grew, I continued to be a constant in his life. When Thomas and Amanda moved into their own apartment across town, I would visit 3 times a week to help with childcare. I set up a college fund for Jackson, putting away a little from each paycheck. Every birthday and Christmas, I made sure to get him something special, even when it meant picking up extra shifts at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. The first signs of tension appeared when Jackson was around 4. Amanda would make comments about how Jackson was too attached to me. She started scheduling activities during my regular visit times. Thomas began echoing her sentiments, suggesting I was undermining their parenting. "Mom, you need to let us be the parents," Thomas told me one evening after I'd brought over homemade chicken soup when Jackson had a cold. "Amanda feels like you're always swooping in to save the day." I was hurt, but tried to respect their boundaries. Still, Jackson would cry when I left, reaching for me and calling my name. Each time, I saw Amanda's jaw tighten. When Thomas finally finished his MBA and landed a job at a prestigious financial firm, things changed dramatically. Suddenly, they could afford the lifestyle Amanda had grown up with. They bought a house in an upscale neighborhood 30 miles away, making my visits less frequent. Despite the distance, Jackson and I remained close. He'd call me after school to tell me about his day. When he was 8, he won first place in the science fair with a project we had worked on together during one of his weekend stays at my house. Amanda was furious. "You had no right to help him with that project," she hissed at me during the celebration dinner. "We were working on something completely different with him." "He came to me," I explained. "He was excited about testing which household materials were the most water-resistant." "Of course he came to you," Thomas interjected. "You always make yourself available, don't you, Mom? Always the hero." That night marked our first significant confrontation, but it wouldn't be the last. As Jackson grew, the rift in our family deepened. By the time Jackson turned 12, Thomas and Amanda had moved to an even more affluent neighborhood in the suburbs, putting another 15 miles between us. Their new house had 6 bedrooms, a pool, and a 3-car garage. Amanda drove a Mercedes SUV and was heavily involved in charity committees with other wealthy women. Thomas was now a senior vice president at his firm, working 60-hour weeks and traveling frequently. My visits were restricted to once a month, always supervised, and always at their home. Never mine. The rules were clear: no sugar, no video games, no undermining their values, whatever that meant. I complied because I wanted to see Jackson. But I noticed how he changed in their presence. Quieter, more reserved, always looking to his mother for approval before answering any question I asked. When Jackson turned 14, he asked if he could stay with me for a weekend. Thomas and Amanda reluctantly agreed, but only after making me promise to enforce their strict study schedule and dietary restrictions. The moment they left my apartment, Jackson transformed. His shoulders relaxed, he smiled more freely, and he talked for hours about school, his friends, and his interest in photography, something his parents dismissed as impractical. "Grandma, I can breathe at your place," he confessed that night as we made cookies together, breaking Amanda's no-sugar rule. "At home, it's like I'm always being watched and judged." Those weekends became our sanctuary. Once a month, Jackson would come to stay, and we would do simple things together. Visit the local art museum, take photos in the park, or just sit and talk about books we'd both read. I never said a negative word about his parents, but I made sure he knew he was perfect, just as he was. When Jackson turned 16, Thomas and Amanda began pushing him toward business school, just like his father. Jackson wanted to study photography and journalism. The arguments at home became more frequent. More than once, Jackson showed up at my door late at night, having taken a bus across town just to escape the tension. "They don't see me," he would say, tears streaming down his face. "They see some future version of Dad they're trying to create." I would hold him, make him tea, and let him sleep in the spare bedroom that was always ready for him. The next morning, I'd drive him back home, facing Amanda's cold stare and Thomas's disappointment. The situation came to a head at Jackson's high school graduation. He had been accepted to several prestigious universities for business as his parents wanted, but also to a well-respected art school for photography. When he announced at his graduation dinner that he had decided to attend the art school, Thomas stood up from the table and walked out. Amanda blamed me. "You've been filling his head with this artistic nonsense for years," she accused, pointing her finger at me in front of the entire family. "This is your fault." Jackson defended me, which only made things worse. That summer was tense, with Jackson spending as much time as possible at my place. It was during those summer months that he met Sarah, a sweet girl from a working-class family who worked at the local coffee shop. She was saving money for community college and shared Jackson's passion for photography. They became inseparable. Thomas and Amanda hated her on sight. She wasn't from their social circle, didn't dress in expensive clothes, and worst of all, in their eyes, she encouraged Jackson's artistic pursuits. They forbade him from seeing her, which only pushed him further away. I welcomed Sarah into my home, taught her my recipes, and watched as she brought out the best in my grandson. When Jackson left for art school that fall, Sarah enrolled in the community college nearby. They maintained their relationship despite Thomas and Amanda's disapproval. 4 years passed. Jackson thrived in art school, winning awards for his photography and landing internships with major magazines. Sarah transferred to a 4-year college and studied education. Thomas and Amanda barely spoke to me anymore, blaming me for Jackson's career choice and his relationship with Sarah. When Jackson called me after his college graduation to tell me he had proposed to Sarah, I was ecstatic. But my joy was short-lived. Thomas and Amanda were determined to prevent the marriage. Amanda's parents, even wealthier than she was, offered Jackson a substantial trust fund if he would reconsider his future. A thinly veiled request to dump Sarah and go to business school. Jackson refused. He and Sarah began planning a simple wedding with their limited funds. I offered to help, giving them money I'd saved for years. We spent weekends looking at affordable venues, making decorations by hand, and planning a menu I could cook myself to save on catering costs. Then came the call that changed everything. Thomas's voice was cold and final. "Mom, Amanda's parents have offered to pay for the entire wedding, a proper wedding at the Grand Lake Hotel. But there's one condition. You're not invited, and we all agree with this decision." We all agreed. Don't come to the wedding. I still remember exactly where I was standing when I got that call. In my kitchen, preparing a casserole to freeze for Jackson and Sarah as a post-honeymoon meal. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering on the linoleum floor. I had to sit down, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. "What do you mean, we all agreed?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Jackson agreed to this." "Yes, Mother," Thomas replied, his voice clipped and formal. "Jackson understands this is for the best. Amanda's parents are spending over $50,000 on this wedding. It will be the social event of the season. We can't have you there making everyone uncomfortable with your ways." "My ways," I repeated, stunned. "Thomas, what are you talking about? I'm Jackson's grandmother. I've been there for him his entire life." "That's the problem, isn't it?" he snapped. "You've always tried to insert yourself to be the favorite. You've undermined our parenting at every turn. You encouraged this ridiculous photography career. You welcomed that girl when we expressly disapproved. Now it's time for you to step back and let us handle things." I tried to speak, but he continued. "The wedding is in 3 weeks. Amanda's mother has already hired the best wedding planner in the state. Sarah's parents have been told their role will be minimal. This is happening with or without your approval, but definitely without your presence." "I want to speak to Jackson," I demanded. "He doesn't want to speak with you right now," Thomas replied. "He's busy with wedding preparations. Just respect our decision for once in your life, Mother." The call ended, and I sat in my kitchen for hours, stunned and heartbroken. How could Jackson agree to this? After everything we'd shared, how could he shut me out of one of the most important days of his life? For days, I called Jackson's cell phone, but he never answered. I left voicemails, each more desperate than the last. "Jackson, please talk to me. I don't understand what's happening. I love you, sweetheart. Please call me back." Finally, after a week of silence, Sarah called me. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Lynda, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "It's all such a mess. Jackson never agreed to ban you from the wedding. Thomas and Amanda told him you refused to come because you disapprove of the big wedding. They told him you said it was a waste of money and against your values." My hand flew to my mouth. "That's a lie, Sarah. I would never say that." "I know," she whispered. "I tried to tell Jackson, but he's so confused. Amanda's parents have taken over everything. They're threatening to cancel their financial support for the wedding and withdraw the trust fund they promised for our future if anyone goes against their wishes. Jackson is torn apart. He doesn't know what to believe anymore." As Sarah continued to explain, the full picture emerged. Amanda's wealthy parents had essentially bought their way into controlling the entire wedding. They'd replaced our handmade decorations with expensive floral arrangements, canceled the venue we'd selected in favor of the Grand Hotel, and were inviting over 200 of their friends and business associates, people Jackson and Sarah barely knew. "They're threatening to disown Jackson completely if he doesn't comply," Sarah said. "Thomas and Amanda are backing them completely. They've convinced Jackson that this is his one chance to secure our financial future. They keep saying that if he loves me, he'll do this for us." "And what do you want, Sarah?" I asked gently. There was a pause before she answered. "I want the wedding we planned together, Lynda. The small, meaningful one, with people who actually care about us. But I don't want to be the reason Jackson loses his family. I don't know what to do." After we hung up, I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside was my own wedding dress, simple but elegant, and a pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. I'd been saving these for Jackson's bride someday. Now it seemed they would remain in this box unused and forgotten. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Jackson as a little boy running into my arms whenever I visited. I thought about the teenager who found refuge in my home when the pressure from his parents became too much. I thought about the young man who had stayed true to his passion despite everything. My grandson deserved to have someone who truly loved him at his wedding. And I deserved to be there too. The next morning, I called my best friend Barbara. We'd been friends for over 40 years, and she knew my family situation intimately. "They can't do this to you," she said firmly after I explained the situation. "It's cruel and manipulative. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" I asked, feeling defeated. "If I force the issue, I might drive Jackson even further away." "Lynda," Barbara said, her voice gentle but firm, "when have you ever backed down from fighting for what matters? That boy loves you. He's being manipulated and lied to. If you don't show up, they win. And worse, Jackson loses the one person who's always been in his corner." She was right. Throughout my life, I'd faced challenges head-on. I'd raised a son alone, built a career, and created a life filled with love and meaning. I couldn't just accept this injustice without at least trying to set things right. "I'm going to that wedding," I decided. "Even if I'm turned away at the door, at least Jackson will know I tried. At least he'll know the truth." The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. I chose a simple but elegant blue dress, Jackson's favorite color. I wrote him a letter explaining everything just in case we didn't get a chance to speak. And I prepared a special gift, a handcrafted album filled with photos of Jackson throughout his life from the day he was born to his college graduation. The final pages were left blank, ready for wedding photos and the life he would build with Sarah. Barbara agreed to drive me to the wedding and provide moral support. "I'll create a distraction if necessary," she joked, though I suspected she wasn't entirely kidding. The night before the wedding, doubt crept in. What if Jackson really had agreed to exclude me? What if my presence only caused him pain on what should be the happiest day of his life? What if this selfish act of defiance permanently damaged our relationship? I barely slept, and when my alarm went off at 6 a.m., I was already awake, staring at the ceiling. I got ready slowly, taking care with my appearance. My hands trembled as I fastened my grandmother's pearl necklace around my neck. I applied my makeup carefully, wanting to look my best despite my age. I packed the photo album and letter in a simple silver gift bag. Barbara arrived at 10 a.m., dressed in her Sunday best. "Ready for battle?" she asked, hugging me tightly. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. The drive to the Grand Lake Hotel took 45 minutes. Throughout the journey, memories of Jackson flooded my mind. Teaching him to ride a bike, bandaging scraped knees, attending school plays, helping with homework, celebrating his first photography prize. How could I not be part of this day? The hotel was imposing. A massive stone structure overlooking the lake surrounded by manicured gardens. Luxury cars filled the parking lot. Uniformed staff directed guests to the grand ballroom. As Barbara parked, I could see floral arrangements being carried inside. Arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly pension. "Look at this place," Barbara whispered. "It's like a royal wedding." "It's not what Jackson and Sarah wanted," I replied, my resolve strengthening. "This is all for show, for Amanda's parents and their friends." We walked toward the entrance where 2 security guards checked names against a guest list. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "This is where I create that distraction," Barbara whispered. She walked up to the guards and launched into an elaborate story about being the florist's assistant and how there was a terrible mix-up with the boutonnieres. While they were distracted, I slipped past them into the hotel. The ceremony wasn't scheduled to start for another 30 minutes, so guests were mingling in the reception area outside the ballroom. I straightened my shoulders, clutched my gift bag tightly, and walked in. The moment I stepped into that ornate reception area, I knew I'd made the right decision. Everything about the venue screamed excess. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, champagne fountains, and flower arrangements taller than me. This wasn't Jackson and Sarah's wedding. This was a spectacle designed to impress Amanda's wealthy friends and associates. I scanned the room for familiar faces. Near the bar stood Thomas, looking uncomfortable in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my car. Beside him was Amanda, draped in designer jewelry, laughing too loudly with a group of women who looked like they'd stepped out of a society magazine. Amanda's parents were holding court near the center of the room, accepting compliments on their generosity from sycophantic guests. I didn't immediately see Jackson or Sarah. Taking a deep breath, I stepped further into the room. Like a wave, silence spread as people noticed me. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. All eyes turned in my direction. Thomas saw me and went pale. He whispered urgently to Amanda, whose head snapped around, eyes widening in horror. Amanda's mother clutched her husband's arm, her face contorting with anger. Thomas marched toward me, his expression thunderous. "Mother," he hissed when he reached me. "What are you doing here? You need to leave immediately." "I'm here for my grandson's wedding," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You weren't invited," he snapped. "Security will escort you out." "Then they'll have to drag me out," I said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Because I'm not missing Jackson's wedding, not when I've been there for every important moment of his life until now." Thomas grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. "You're embarrassing yourself and this family. Leave now, before you make an even bigger scene." Just then, a door at the far end of the room opened. Jackson emerged, handsome in his tuxedo, looking nervous and uncomfortable. He was speaking with the wedding planner, nodding absently at whatever she was saying. He hadn't seen me yet. "Jackson," I called out, my voice breaking slightly. His head jerked up. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a terrible moment, his expression was unreadable. Then in an instant, his face transformed. Disbelief, joy, and relief washing over his features in quick succession. "Grandma," he whispered, though somehow I heard him across the distance. Then, ignoring the wedding planner's protests, ignoring the guests, ignoring everything, Jackson ran toward me. Ran like he used to as a child, arms outstretched, face alight with pure joy. Thomas tried to intercept him, but Jackson dodged past. And then my grandson was in my arms, holding me so tightly I could hardly breathe, his body shaking with sobs. "You came," he kept saying. "You came. They told me you refused to come. They said you thought this wedding was a mistake." "I would never miss your wedding," I whispered, stroking his hair like I did when he was small. "Nothing could keep me away." Sarah appeared then, beautiful in her wedding gown, tears streaming down her face. She joined our embrace, whispering, "Thank you," over and over. Amanda and her parents stormed over, faces contorted with rage. "What is the meaning of this?" Amanda's mother demanded. This woman was expressly uninvited. Jackson pulled away from me, wiping his eyes, but keeping one arm firmly around my shoulders. "Uninvited by who?" he asked, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Not by me. Never by me." Thomas stepped forward. "Jackson, be reasonable. We discussed this. Your grandmother's presence would only complicate things. She disapproves of this whole wedding." "That's a lie," I said firmly. "I never said that. I've supported Jackson and Sarah's relationship from the beginning. The only wedding I disapproved of was this extravagant show that has nothing to do with who they really are." Jackson looked at his father, realization dawning. "You lied to me," he said slowly. "You told me Grandma refused to come because she thought I was selling out. You told me she said our marriage was doomed because of this wedding." Thomas couldn't meet his son's eyes. Amanda stepped in. "We were trying to protect you, Jackson. Your grandmother has always tried to turn you against us. We wanted one day, just one day, without her influence. Sarah spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. The only people who've tried to control Jackson are you. You've manipulated him his entire life. You've tried to force him to be someone he's not. Amanda's father, red-faced with anger, stepped forward. This is outrageous. We've spent a fortune on this wedding. If this woman stays, we're leaving and taking our checkbook with us. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in abandoned drinks. Jackson looked around at the elaborate decorations, the unfamiliar faces, the ostentation that had nothing to do with the simple, meaningful wedding he and Sarah had originally planned. Then he looked at me, the woman who had loved him unconditionally his entire life. The person who had supported his dreams, comforted his sorrows, and celebrated his joys. His decision was written on his face before he spoke a word. Then leave, Jackson said, his voice clear and unwavering. Take your checkbook and go. This isn't the wedding Sarah and I wanted anyway. Gasps echoed around the room. Amanda's face drained of color. Jackson, you can't be serious. This wedding cost over $100,000, your trust fund. I don't want your money, Jackson interrupted. Not if it comes with these conditions. Not if it means cutting out the people who truly love me. Thomas stepped forward, his expression a mixture of anger and panic. Son, you're making a terrible mistake. Think about your future with Sarah. Think about what you're throwing away. I'm not throwing away anything valuable, Jackson replied. I'm choosing what matters. I'm choosing love over money. I'm choosing authenticity over pretense. He looked directly at me, his eyes shining. I'm choosing the people who have always chosen me. Amanda's parents were already storming toward the exit, Amanda's mother declaring loudly that they were done with this ungrateful family. Thomas hesitated, looking between his son and his wife. Thomas, Amanda hissed, we're leaving, now. My son, my only child, gave me one last cold look before following his wife and in-laws out the door. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was overshadowed by the warmth of Jackson's arms still around my shoulders. After they left, an awkward silence fell over the room. Many guests, friends of Amanda's family, began to gather their belongings, unsure what to do. But to my surprise, many others stayed seated, watching with interest as this drama unfolded. Well, said an older man who turned out to be the officiant, what would the bride and groom like to do now? Sarah and Jackson exchanged a look, communicating silently in the way of two people deeply in tune with each other. Then Sarah smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her face. I'd like to marry the love of my life, she said simply, without all the fuss, just the people who really care about us. Her parents stepped forward then, quiet, hardworking people who had been relegated to the background by Amanda's parents. We're here for you, Sarah's father said, however you want to do this. What followed was one of the most beautiful transformations I've ever witnessed. Guests who chose to stay, about half the original number, helped rearrange the ballroom. The elaborate floral archway remained, but chairs were arranged in a more intimate semicircle. Someone found a portable speaker, and Sarah's college roommate volunteered her playlist of acoustic love songs. I gave Jackson the photo album I'd brought. He flipped through the pages, tears streaming down his face again. This is the most meaningful gift anyone has ever given me, he whispered. Then he asked me something that made my heart soar. Grandma, would you walk me down the aisle? The ceremony was nothing like the lavish production that had been planned, but it was perfect in every way that mattered. I walked my grandson down the aisle, my arm linked with his pride, bursting in my chest. Sarah was escorted by both her parents. The officiant spoke about choosing love, about building a marriage based on mutual respect and shared values, words that resonated far more than the flowery script that had been prepared. When Jackson and Sarah exchanged vows they had written themselves, vows that had been deemed too simple by the wedding planner, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. They promised to support each other's dreams, to be each other's safe haven, and to always choose love over materialism. The reception was equally transformed. Without the 7-course gourmet meal guests shared, what food was already prepared in the kitchen? The hotel staff, sympathetic to the situation, brought out trays of appetizers. Sarah's father connected his phone to the sound system and played music that the young couple actually enjoyed. People kicked off uncomfortable shoes and danced freely. I was sitting at a table watching Jackson and Sarah share their first dance when my phone rang. It was Thomas. "Mom," he said, his voice strained. "This has gotten out of hand. Amanda's parents are furious. They're talking about cutting Jackson out of their will completely. Can't you see what you've done?" "What I've done," I replied calmly. "I showed up for my grandson. I showed him he's loved unconditionally." "What have you done, Thomas?" "Because from where I'm standing, you chose money and status over your own son's happiness." There was a long pause. "It's not that simple," he finally said, his voice smaller. "It actually is that simple," I replied. "Love should always be that simple." After I hung up, Jackson came to sit beside me. "Was that Dad?" he asked. I nodded. "He's trying to process what happened." "Do you think he and Mom will ever forgive me?" he asked, suddenly looking very young. I took his hand. "The question isn't whether they'll forgive you, sweetheart. It's whether you can forgive them, and that might take time." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. Then he smiled. "Thank you for coming today, for fighting for me, for always fighting for me." "I'll never stop," I promised. And in that moment, surrounded by genuine joy and authentic love, I knew that whatever happened with Thomas and Amanda Jackson would be all right. We both would. It's been 2 years since that memorable wedding day. So much has changed, yet the core truth remains the same. Fighting for love is always worth it, even when it costs you something precious. The weeks following the wedding were difficult. Thomas and Amanda refused to speak to Jackson or me. Amanda's parents followed through on their threat to withdraw financial support. The trust fund they had promised was rescinded. Jackson and Sarah moved into a small apartment and started their married life with far less financial security than they had anticipated. But what they lacked in money, they made up for in happiness. Jackson's photography career took off when a wedding guest who worked for a magazine was impressed by his portfolio. Sarah completed her education degree and secured a position at an elementary school she loved. They built a life based on their values, not someone else's expectations. 3 months after the wedding, Thomas called me. He came alone to my apartment, looking tired and unsettled. "Amanda and I are in therapy," he said after accepting a cup of coffee. "This situation with Jackson has forced us to look at some uncomfortable truths about our marriage and our parenting." "I'm glad you're getting help," I told him sincerely. "I don't agree with what you did," he continued, "but I understand why you did it. Jackson has always been special to you." "Jackson is special, period," I corrected gently. "And he deserved to have his wedding his way with the people he loves." Thomas nodded slowly. "I miss him," he admitted. "Amanda isn't ready to reconcile yet, but I'd like to see my son." That first meeting between Thomas and Jackson was awkward but necessary. Healing between them has been slow with steps forward and back. Amanda eventually joined these reconciliation efforts, though her relationship with Jackson remains more formal than warm. Her parents still refuse to acknowledge what happened, maintaining that Jackson chose that woman, meaning me, over family loyalty. But the most beautiful development came a year after the wedding, when Sarah announced she was pregnant. The impending arrival of their first child brought a new opportunity for healing. When little Emma was born, Thomas was at the hospital within hours. Even Amanda came bringing an extravagant gift and an attempt at reconciliation. Watching my great-granddaughter come into this world, I reflected on the cycles of family conflict and healing. Emma would grow up knowing she was loved unconditionally by her parents and by me. She would learn from Jackson and Sarah what it means to stand up for your values, to choose authenticity over appearance, love over money. Last month, Jackson and Sarah invited everyone to Emma's christening. Thomas and Amanda's reluctant parents, Sarah's warm family, and me. It was the first time all of us had been in the same room since the wedding. There was tension, certainly, but also the tentative beginnings of a new kind of family dynamic, one based on respect rather than control. After the ceremony, Jackson pulled me aside. "We want you to know that we're naming Emma's trust fund after you," he told me. "The Lynda Martin Educational Trust. It's small now, but we'll add to it over time. We want her to know the grandmother who taught me what really matters in life." I couldn't speak through my tears. This small gesture meant more than all the lavish weddings or trust funds in the world. The truth is, standing up for what you believe in has consequences. My relationship with Thomas will never be what it once was. Amanda and her parents still treat me with chilly politeness at best. But the authentic connections I've maintained, with Jackson, Sarah, and now little Emma, are worth every difficult moment. What I learned through this journey is that courage isn't about making grand gestures. It's about showing up when it matters most. It's about being true to your heart, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. It's about choosing love again and again, even when that choice comes with pain. Sometimes family isn't defined by blood or obligation. Sometimes it's created through consistent love, unwavering support, and the courage to fight for each other. Jackson and Sarah have created that kind of family. Emma will grow up in that kind of family, and I'm blessed to be part of it. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping peace and standing up for what you believe is right? What would you have done in my situation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family courage and the complex beauty of unconditional love. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone you love is simply to show up.